Mangwana ni Malelepo Vukenjani, Kleklas Vadave Africa. Welcome to Africa Good Morning, the news and current affairs show that remains your portal into Africa's most potent stories. These are some of the stories that we'll be looking at from broader Africa. U.S. escalates drive to isolate International Criminal Court. Kenya launches nationwide crackdown following political violence. Calls grow for an independent probe into Liberia $19.2 million cocaine seizure. South African corruption case setback after suspect withdraws a plea agreement. DStv 285, GOtv 25, oneup2.com, Network Media Hub, and NTV Afrika.my.na. That is where you can watch the show. My name is Ashwin Berry. Top stories shortly.
Namibia is a land of movement, with waves that never stop reaching forward. Here, adventure is not something we search for. It is something we are born into. In every corner of this country, creativity rises, from artists, from athletes, from dreamers. And when the world comes to explore Namibia, they discover something extraordinary. Because when sport moves people, creativity moves ideas, and tourism moves the world toward us. Something powerful happens. A platform where movement meets imagination, where industries connect, where opportunity grows, where Namibia's next chapter begins. Welcome to the Creative Sport Tourism Expo. Exhibit, partner, experience. Creative sport tourism.
All right, this is Africa Good Morning. Let's get into our top stories. We start off with the U.S. escalating its drive to isolate the International Criminal Court. The United States has announced a broad campaign against the International Criminal Court, describing the institution as an intolerable threat to U.S. sovereignty. The Trump administration said it would encourage other countries to withdraw from the Hague-based court and end financial support. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the ICC was using international law to wage a campaign against the United States. The State Department said the objective is to systematically disable the court's ability to operate, target American servicemen or officials, or threaten American sovereignty. Washington previously imposed asset freezes and travel bans on ICC officials following the arrest warrant issued for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over the war in Gaza. The United States maintains the ICC has no jurisdiction over Americans because it never ratified the Rome Statute. 3 ICC judges sanctioned by the Trump administration filed a lawsuit in June challenging those measures. Burundi and the Philippines have withdrawn from the court, while Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have begun withdrawal procedures. South Africa and the Gambia announced withdrawals but later remained members. The United States, Russia, and Israel signed but never ratified the Rome Statute, while China and India never signed. Here is United States Senator Marco Rubio.
For 250 years, Americans have governed ourselves as a free and sovereign people. We choose our own leaders, we determine our own laws, and when we're accused of a crime, we stand for judgment before a jury of our own peers. This is the essential and indispensable feature of our form of government. It is the foundation of our shared way of life. But today, powerful people in faraway places want to take that away from us. They believe that they should be in charge of your laws, of your country, your life, and they don't care whether or not you agree. Halfway across the world, there's an institution that calls itself the International Criminal Court. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. But chances are you don't know the names of its judges, of its prosecutors, or its president. And you shouldn't have to. But as we speak, the ICC and its friends are waging a war against our country, not with bullets or missiles, but with statutes and compacts and the force of so-called international law. When the ICC was born 24 years ago, they told us that it was merely a narrow backstop, a global court that would step in to prosecute only the gravest offenses, things like genocide and war crimes, and only when a nation's courts were unable to prosecute them on their own. But the truth is, it was something far more radical and extreme. It was a global tribunal staffed by unelected globalist bureaucrats who claim their power is almost unlimited. The danger of this global court has only continued to grow. Today, it threatens every aspect of our political and legal system. Border Patrol agents removing violent criminals from our country, American Marines risking their lives to defend our homeland, prosecutors working to dismantle terrorist plots to attack and kill Americans. If we stand idle, all of them would be at the mercy of foreign judges thousands of miles away, facing the constant risk of prosecution and even imprisonment for the so-called crime of defending their own country. The American people never agreed to any of this, and they never will. Read the words of our Declaration of Independence. We fought a revolution against a foreign power transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. Independence is our birthright. We will never let foreign bureaucrats take that away from us. This administration will not sit by as the ICC and its allies seek to threaten our people. If they believe they can deprive us of our sovereignty, we will teach them the full meaning of American resolve.
All right, let's move on to Kenya, where Interior Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen has confirmed the arrest of 20 people following weekend violence in Kisumu and Nyahururu, and ordered a nationwide intelligence-led operation targeting organized criminal gangs and their financiers. Murkomen directed the Inspector General of Police to pursue armed gangs, accomplices and sponsors, saying the government would not tolerate political violence, goonism or ethnic incitement. He said the National Police Service had arrested 20 suspects in connection with the violence, which claimed lives and destroyed property while investigations continue. Murkomen also urged the judiciary to ensure those arraigned face the full force of the law. He warned politicians against mobilizing, financing, or protecting criminal gangs and called on leaders to avoid inflammatory statements. In Kisumu, security agencies have detained 200 youths for screening and are preparing to arraign 8 key suspects linked to Sunday's deadly violence outside St. Stephen's ACK Cathedral in Milimani. Kisumu Governor Anyang' Nyong'o described the incident as organized criminal violence. Now we swing over to Liberia, where Alternative National Congress political leader Alexander B. Cummings has intensified criticism of the Unity Party administration over its handling of Liberia's $19.2 million cocaine seizure, accusing the government of conducting a slow and secretive investigation. Speaking in Monrovia, Cummings questioned why more than a month after the June 8 interception at Roberts International Airport, there were still no definitive answers on who financed the shipment, how it entered the country, or who organized the operation. While acknowledging several arrests, he argued investigators were concentrating on lower-level suspects instead of those who financed, facilitated, or protected the shipment. Cummings questioned how such a large consignment could enter Liberia without the knowledge of people in authority. He called for an independent investigation with the international technical assistance, urging cooperation with the Mano River Union and ECOWAS. He also raised questions surrounding Michael Brown, known as U.S. Marshal, following testimony before the Liberian Senate. Cummings criticized what he described as selective enforcement of anti-drug laws and warned that drug trafficking fuels corruption, weakens institutions, discourages investment, and threatens national security. Now we swing over to South Africa, where prosecutors have suffered a setback after businessman Vusimusi Matlala withdrew from a plea agreement linked to an ongoing police corruption investigation. Matlala pulled out after a court recommended a 12-year prison sentence instead of the agreed 8 years. He had pleaded guilty on corruption, fraud, and money laundering charges, relating to allegations that he bribed senior police officials to secure a 360 million rand tender for his health company Medicare 24 in 2024. The agreement required him to become a state witness and testify against 12 suspects, including Police Chief General Fani Masemola, who denies the charges. Prosecutors said they would no longer be able to rely on evidence contained in Matla's affidavit after his withdrawal. The National Prosecuting Authority nevertheless said it still had a strong and winnable case. The Democratic Alliance had criticized the original plea agreement, describing it as a betrayal of accountability. The matter returns to court on 11 September. And now, as we cap off our top stories, we're going to get a recap from Talent Gore as she talks about the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 being signed by the President of Zimbabwe.
President Emmerson Mnangagwa signed into law constitutional amendments extending presidential term from 5 years to 7 years, allowing him to remain in office until 2030 and abolishing the direct popular election of the president in favor of a vote by parliament. Both houses of parliament, which is the Senate and the National Assembly, were dominated by the ruling ZANU-PF party and its proxies, and they approved the bill late last month. Mnangagwa's assent to the Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment Act number 3, 2026, published as Act number 6 of 2026, was announced in a special government gazette on Tuesday. The National Assembly voted 226 to 41 on June 30 to accept the changes proposed by the Senate, which had passed the bill by 75 votes to 4 on June 24. The new Section 92 does away with direct presidential elections introduced in 1987, replacing them with election by MPs and senators sitting jointly after every general election or whenever a vacancy arises. A candidate needs more than half of the valid vote cast by lawmakers to win, with a runoff between the top two candidates if no one secures a majority in the first round. The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, who administer the process, and a person elected president must give up their seat in parliament, and any vacancy in the presidency must be filled within 30 days, during which no law introducing substantive policy changes may be passed. So just last Tuesday, President Emmerson Mnangagwa signed into law the Constitution Amendment Bill number 3, which had gone for months in debate in Parliament, and also Constitution. This is the first time that the Constitution has been changed, especially in regards to presidential limits from 5 years to 7 years. Well, this is the first time since 1987 this act has been changed. So right now, it is no longer a Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3, but rather a Constitution Amendment Act. It has now been passed and it is now in Parliament. And just on Sunday, President Emmerson Mnangagwa had an exclusive interview with state media editors, where he explained why it was necessary for the government of Zimbabwe to pass this into law. And he said that he expected Zimbabweans in general to be in favor of the Constitution Amendment Bill number 3, which is now a Constitution Amendment Act. So he said that he expected Zimbabweans to be in favor of this new law. So yes, that is all for now. And it seems like most people, those within the ruling party, they are quite happy with this Constitution Amendment Act now, but those opposition politicians, they are not quite happy with.
All right, those have been our top stories on Africa Good Morning. We're going to have a look at the weather before we return with more news from Africa. Business First Africa is a forward-looking business show that goes beyond balance sheets to capture how Africans are building, creating, and living. Afrotech explores innovation, AI, and digital systems shaping the continent's economies. Brave and Building profiles Namibian entrepreneurs and businesses transforming industries and urban spaces. Creative Capital spotlights creatives and the creative economy, unpacking how culture becomes value. Africa in 10 delivers a sharp roundup of key developments across the continent. Don't miss Business First Africa, because it's not just business, it's life.
Aitsa is 'n eg Namibiese inisiatief. Ons reis op die hartklop van Afrika en vertel stories van mense en hulle dorpe op verskeie platforms insluitende televisie en sosiale media. Dit is joune, syne, julle en ook almal van hulle aan die ander kant van ons grense sinne. En dit maak Aitsa 'n lekker ding. Kyk Aitsa maande om 18:30 op NTV, 102.com, as ook op Netwerk Media Hub en NTV Afrikaans se YouTube kanale. Volg ons op Facebook of besoek ons webwerf by aitsafrika.com.
All right, let's talk about what is happening with oil. Asian markets fell on Monday as intensified Gulf fighting and Iran's claim that it had closed the Strait of Hormuz drove oil prices sharply higher and renewed global inflation concerns. Brent crude rose 4.3% to $79.31 a barrel, while U.S. crude gained 4.4% to $74.62. S&P 500 futures dropped 0.6%, Nasdaq futures lost 1.3%, and European futures also declined. Japan's Nikkei shed 2.2%, while MSCI's Asia-Pacific Index outside Japan fell 1.8%. South Korea's KOSPI plunged 7.6%, as leveraged semiconductor bets came under pressure. The rise in oil pushed two-year Treasury yields to 4.2393%, their highest since early 2025, while investors reduced expectations for Federal Reserve easing and priced 39 basis points of tightening by year end. The dollar index held firm at 101.13, with the euro, yen, and pound weakening. Markets are also awaiting June inflation data, Federal Reserve Chair Kevin Walsh's congressional testimony, and corporate earnings from major banks Netflix, General Electric, and Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. Gold slipped 1.5% to about 4,060 an ounce during trading as yields rose. All right, as we close off the show, this is an update from Wandile Sihlobo's X page. Do follow him as he gives a lot of very relevant news with regards to agriculture in Southern Africa and in South Africa. Here, he talks about South Africa's maize harvest process being roughly 14% behind last year's pace. Before he comes on, we're going to go ahead and say goodbye from the studio on DStv 285, GOtv 25, 1up2.com, Network Media Hub, and ntvafrika.my.na. Tomorrow, we will be joined by Ari Hohad as he delivers the South Africa report. And as always, on Friday, we'll be going through our news videos of the week from Namibia, and on both days, the potent stories stemming from the African continent. From me, Ashwin Berry, and the Africa Good Morning team, Swera Jaganaka.
Hey folks, if you talk to people that observe the grain markets in South Africa, they'll probably tell you that this has been one of those unusual seasons. The headline point that many people, including myself, that we have communicated is that we are having one of the excellent seasons in terms of the grain output. But the other side of the conversation is that the season has been fairly late, especially for maize, late by roughly a month and a half. This dates back from the start of the season, where it was very wet and some folks had to plant later than the usual period. And as a result of that, even now in terms of the harvest is pretty much behind when you compare to the previous season's pace. I was just looking at the data now. We are almost mid-July, and the farmers have delivered to the commercial silos around 6.4 million tons of maize. And remember, the maize harvest for the year is expected to be around 17.3 million tons. So there's still a lot of grain that needs to be delivered to commercial silos. And of course, not all grain go to these silos. Some is on their on-farm storage. But the point is that we're still fairly behind. When you look at this and you compare it to last year, we are roughly 14% behind those deliveries. And consider the fact that this year we also expecting the biggest maize crop on record, which is that 17.3 million tons. The key point then here is that we will probably see this harvest continuing all the way to the beginning of September, which then can be slightly tricky because mid-October we're supposed to be starting the new season. So these are all of the things that we are all watching. And in fact, some people may even now start to estimate that perhaps we are not going to start from mid-October, which is our traditional planting period. We may start maybe towards the end of October in the eastern regions of the country. And of course, in the western regions, we typically plant from mid-November onwards. And depending on the rain pattern, we can even plant all the way through to the beginning of January, which is what we've seen in the previous season, which is why we're at this stage that we are in now, where we are talking about all of these things. But if you are a consumer, maize user, poultry industry, and all of this doesn't really matter that much for you because the quality is still great and the crop will still come in and the prices are still fairly low on the back of what is expected, which is in terms of the size of this harvest. But I thought it was important just to jump in and talk about the harvest, because when people drive around South Africa, they will probably see that the harvest is continuing far longer than they typically observe across the country. And again, the quality from what we are observing on the data and what we are hearing from some of the farmers remains fairly decent in all of this. So in the coming weeks, as the harvest progresses, we'll probably be jumping in and I'll be posting some of the numbers as to what really is happening in the fields. But for now, the activity seems fairly below the pace that we saw last year. The fact that though it also rained for a much prolonged period all the way through to mid-May is another thing that adds to these delays, in addition to the fact that the folks had planted fairly late. Those rains, now that at least they haven't done much damage on the quality of the crop so far, they've helped in improving the soil moisture, which is excellent for the start of the new season, which will be a tougher year given that there's all of these reports of El Nino, which I've written about. And if you haven't read what I've written about this, I've posted it in my Substack, which is in the bio in all my social platforms.